The sun had set over Makwili, leaving the city glowing with soft lights and the sound of distant traffic. Inside a small room filled with old computers and wires, four friends sat together: Tariq, Zuberi, Lina, and Kato. They were young, full of ideas, and tired of watching the same things happen again and again in their country. Prices went up, promises were broken, and people suffered while the leaders grew richer. Tariq looked at the screen and said, "We talk about change every day but no one listens. Maybe it's time we do something." Zuberi laughed at first. "Do something? Like what? March in the streets? They'll arrest us before we reach the gate." Lina, who had been quiet, turned and said softly, "No. We can use our words. We can use the internet." Kato nodded. "Yes. We can show the truth without showing our faces." That night the four friends made a plan. They would create a secret page online, a page that spoke for the people. They called it the Mirror of Truth. Tariq, who was good with computers, built the page. Lina wrote the first story about a hospital that had no medicine because the money was stolen. Zuberi took pictures while Kato searched for real stories from villagers. When they posted the first message, no one expected much. But by morning hundreds had shared it. People commented, "Finally, someone is brave enough to speak." From that day their lives changed. Every evening after work they met at Tariq's room to post new stories. They worked quietly, always careful not to use their real names. The page grew fast. Within weeks, it became the talk of the town. People gathered in markets and tea shops saying, "Did you see what the Mirror of Truth posted today?" It was as if the whole country had finally found a voice that said what everyone felt but feared to speak aloud. But with fame came risk. One morning Lina saw their story mentioned on the news. A government man said, "These liars want to bring chaos. They will be caught soon." Her hands shook as she turned off the TV. That evening when she told the others, they all laughed nervously. Zuberi said, "If they're angry, that means we're doing something right." Tariq, though smiling, could not ignore the unease growing in his heart. They continued anyway. Each story they posted hit harder than the last. They showed secret deals, stolen funds, and the faces of officials who pretended to care. The people began to love them, but the leaders began to hate them. Tariq sometimes stayed up all night, making sure no one could trace them online. But still he worried. Lina, the only woman in the group, often wrote messages that touched hearts. She wrote about mothers who gave birth under trees because hospitals had no doctors. She wrote about children studying under streetlights because schools had no electricity. Each word spread like fire. Even strangers sent messages thanking them. One night, as rain poured heavily, the four friends sat together drinking tea. "Do you ever think we might get caught?" Lina asked. Zuberi smiled. "We are ghosts, my friend. No one will ever find us." Tariq looked at the flickering light on his screen. "Ghosts can still be chased," he said softly. They all went quiet for a while, listening to the rain. Despite the fear, their passion grew stronger. Every story they told revealed more truth. People started calling the Mirror of Truth the people's voice. But it also made enemies. Some politicians hired men to find them. Some tried to hack the page. Others spread lies, saying the page was run by foreign spies. Still, the friends never stopped. Sometimes they received warnings from unknown numbers. "Stop before it's too late." Lina's heart raced whenever her phone buzzed, but she deleted every message and continued writing. Tariq added stronger protections to their page. Zuberi began wearing a cap to hide his face in public. Kato, who collected stories from villages, avoided speaking to strangers. They had become careful, but they had also become famous. Weeks turned into months, and the Mirror of Truth became unstoppable. The government grew restless. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Reporters were warned not to mention the page. But it was too late. The people already believed in it. In every corner of Makwili, from city streets to small villages, the words from the Mirror of Truth echoed in conversations. One afternoon, Tariq saw his mother reading a printed version of one of their stories. She said proudly, "These people are brave. They speak what we all feel." Tariq smiled weakly, hiding his fear. He couldn't tell her that her own son was one of those brave people she admired. The friends became closer than ever. They were like a small family bound by courage and danger. But danger always waits. One evening, as Tariq was shutting down his computer, a message popped up, "We are watching you." His heart stopped. He called the others right away. Lina said it was probably just someone trying to scare them. But deep down, everyone knew the truth: they were being followed. Still, they decided to post one last big story. It was about a minister who had stolen millions meant for clean water. They gathered their proof, photos, and documents. Tarek looked at his friends and said, "Once we post this, there's no going back." Lena smiled sadly. "Then let's make it count." That night the story went live. The reaction was bigger than anything before. Thousands of people shared it within hours. Streets buzzed with anger and hope. For the first time, people spoke openly against their leaders. It felt like victory. But as the night grew dark, Tarek couldn't sleep. He looked out the window and saw a black car parked near the corner of his street. Inside, two men sat quietly. His stomach tightened. He knew what it meant. Their secret wasn't safe anymore. Still, he whispered to himself, "We started something that cannot be stopped." And he was right. The page had already lit a fire in the hearts of the people of Makwili. Whether they were caught or not, the truth was finally alive. And as the clock struck midnight, the four friends sat together again, silent but proud, knowing that one small act of courage had already begun to shake the whole country. The end. The success of the Mirror of Truth spread through Makwili like wind through dry grass. Every week, new stories appeared on the page, each one sharper, braver, and more daring than the last. People in buses read them out loud. Market women discussed them as they sold their fruits. Taxi drivers argued about them with passengers. Everyone wanted to know who was behind the mysterious page that spoke so boldly. But while the people celebrated, those in power grew restless. The leaders who once walked proudly now lived in fear of what might be revealed next. They called special meetings, whispering about the danger of this unknown voice. The president himself once slammed his fist on the table during a meeting, shouting, "Find them! Whoever they are, they must be stopped before they destroy the country." For Tarek, Zuberi, Lena, and Kato, life began to change. They had become both heroes and targets. Tarek's phone buzzed constantly with messages from strangers thanking them for their courage. "You speak for us," one message read. But mixed among the kind words were threats. "You will regret this," said another. Tarek deleted them, pretending not to care, but each one made his stomach twist with worry. At night, Lena began to notice a dark car parked across the street from her small apartment. It came often, always at different hours. The first time she thought it was coincidence. The second time she told herself it was her imagination. But the third night, when she saw the same car again with two men sitting inside, her hands trembled. She called Tarek. "Something's not right," she whispered. Tarek told her to stay calm and not to open the door for anyone. Zuberi, who worked as a photographer, started being followed too. Once, as he walked home from the market, he noticed a man in a black jacket behind him. When he turned suddenly, the man stopped and pretended to make a phone call. Zuberi's heart raced. He walked faster and didn't look back. They met that night at Tarek's room, the usual meeting place filled with computers, wires, and papers. The light flickered as they spoke quietly. "We are being watched," Lena said. Kato looked serious. "Then we must be careful. Maybe we should pause for a while." Tarek shook his head. "No. If we stop now, they win. The truth must be told no matter what." Zuberi frowned. "You sound brave, but what if they find us? What if they come here?" Tarek looked at his friends. "They can't find what they can't see. We move from place to place. We use different names. That's how we stay safe." So they continued, even though fear followed them everywhere. Their hearts beat faster with every new post, but they refused to give up. Every story they published made more people believe, and that gave them strength. One night, they decided to write their biggest story yet. It was about a powerful minister named Kamau, the man in charge of national projects. They had found proof that he had stolen millions meant for new schools and hospitals. Kato had met a worker who gave them secret documents as evidence. The papers showed how the money was moved into foreign accounts. When Lena read through the documents, she sighed. "If we post this, there's no going back." Tarek nodded slowly. "It's the truth. People deserve to know." They worked all night. Tarek checked the files, making sure no one could trace them. Zuberi added photos. Lena wrote the story in her soft but strong voice. Kato made sure the evidence was clear. At dawn, when the city was still asleep, they uploaded the post. By morning it exploded. Every radio and news station talked about it. "The Mirror of Truth exposes Minister Kamau," shouted one headline. Crowds gathered outside the minister's office, shouting for justice. The whole country buzzed with anger and excitement. But not everyone was cheering. Inside government offices, phones rang non-stop. Angry voices filled the rooms. "Who are these people? How did they get this information?" someone shouted. The minister himself went pale. He called his guards and ordered, "Find them. I don't care what it takes." The friends watched the news that evening, their hearts pounding. Lena smiled nervously. "We did it. Everyone knows now. Tarek nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. It's not over yet, he said quietly. They will come after us harder this time. That night, as they walked home, Tarek noticed another car following slowly behind. He turned corners, took long paths, and even walked through narrow streets, but the car stayed close. Finally, it drove off, leaving him shaken. When he reached home, he locked his door and sat in silence. A few days later, strange things started to happen. Zubri's internet stopped working suddenly. Lena's phone went dead for a whole day. Kato saw two men near his workplace asking questions about him. Tarek knew what it meant. The government was closing in. Still, they couldn't stop. If we run, our message dies, Tarek said during their next meeting. We must stand firm. Lena looked at him with worried eyes. But standing firm doesn't mean dying for nothing, she said. What if they catch us? Tarek took a deep breath. Then at least we will know we tried. That night they planned another post. Tarek typed quickly, unaware that he had made a small but deadly mistake. When he uploaded the story, he didn't notice that one of the files contained a location tag. It was a small piece of code that revealed where they had sent the message from. The mistake went unnoticed by the group but not by the government. Within hours, a team of cyber officers traced the signal to a small area in Makwili. The search began quietly but effectively. The friends didn't know yet that their freedom was hanging by a thread. They laughed together that evening, proud of what they had done. They shared a simple meal of rice and beans, joking about how the minister must be panicking. Outside, however, the world was already changing for them. By midnight, dark cars began moving through the city. A list of names was printed on a desk somewhere. Men with radios waited for the final signal to move. Tarek, sitting by his window, looked out at the quiet street. He could feel the weight of something coming. Do you think we did the right thing? Lena had asked earlier. Her voice echoed in his head. He didn't answer then, but now, as the night stretched on, he whispered to himself, yes, even if it costs us everything. He didn't know that the mistake had already been made. He didn't know that their greatest story would also become the beginning of their fall. But in his heart he felt something shift, fear, pride, and destiny mixed together. The lights of Makwili flickered in the distance, and the sound of sirens rose far away, cutting through the silence of the night. The night was still when Tarek pressed the button to post their latest story. The others gathered around, their eyes fixed on the glowing screen. It was a powerful piece, one that would shake the whole city. They didn't know that as they celebrated quietly, something dangerous had already happened. In his rush, Tarek had forgotten to hide the location code on their computer. It was a small mistake, a line of data no one could see, but it was enough for the police to find them. The next morning the post went viral. People talked about it in the markets and schools, saying the Mirror of Truth had done it again. But inside a tall government building, a group of officers was already at work. A young officer stared at his screen and said, "Sir, I found something." The signal came from the west side of Makwili. His boss leaned forward. "Track it. Now." Within hours the search began. Cars moved quietly through the city. Officers dressed in plain clothes watched the streets, checking every house that matched the signal area. Meanwhile, Tarek and his friends met in their usual spot, unaware of the danger closing in. Lena smiled as she read the messages online. "People love the story," she said. "Everyone is sharing it." Zubri laughed. "The minister must be hiding under his bed." Kato poured tea for everyone, his hands steady but his eyes tired. "We should rest," he said softly. "We've done enough for today." They didn't know it was their last calm night in the city. Around midnight, Tarek heard a strange noise outside. A car door shut softly. He looked through the window and saw shadows moving. His heart started to beat faster. He grabbed his phone and sent a quick message to Lena. "Don't sleep. Something's wrong." Minutes later, someone knocked on the door, 3 slow knocks. Tarek didn't answer. He looked again through the curtain. A man stood near the gate, holding a small radio. Behind him, another figure waited in the dark. Tarek's breath caught in his throat. He rushed to the small room where Zubri was sleeping on the floor. "Wake up," he whispered. "We have to go. Now." Zubri sat up quickly. "What? Why?" "They found us." In minutes, the small room turned into a storm of movement. Lena packed her bag, shaking with fear. Kato grabbed the laptop and all their files. Tarek turned off the lights and whispered, "No noise." Out the back. They slipped through the rear door into the narrow alley. The sound of footsteps and voices came from the front. They ran, their shoes splashing through puddles as the night rain began to fall. Behind them, flashlights flickered through the darkness. Lena stumbled but Zuberi caught her hand and pulled her forward. They ran until the city lights faded behind them and the road turned to dirt. By the time they reached the countryside, the stars were out and their clothes were soaked. Finally, Cato pointed to an old, abandoned house by the road. The roof was broken in some places and the windows were dusty. "We can stay there," he said, panting. They entered quietly. The air smelled of old wood and dust. There was only one small bed, a broken chair and a table. They spread a blanket on the floor and sat together in silence. For a long time no one spoke. Only the sound of rain filled the air. Lena leaned against the wall, her face pale. "We almost got caught," she whispered. Tarek nodded slowly. "It was my fault," he said. "I forgot to hide the computer trail. They found us because of me." Zuberi placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't blame yourself. We're all in this together. What matters is that we got away." Days passed slowly in the old house. They couldn't use their phones or go outside during the day. They lived on canned food and water from a nearby stream. The nights were long and cold. Sometimes they listened to the radio quietly. The news was full of talk about the Mirror of Truth. "Authorities confirmed they have found traces of the group behind the website," the announcer said. "But their exact location remains unknown." Lena closed her eyes and sighed. "They think we're gone." Cato looked out the window at the dark fields. "Maybe that's good. If they think we disappeared, we might be safe for now." But deep down none of them felt safe. Every sound outside made them jump. Every creak of the old house felt like footsteps. Tarek barely slept. He kept thinking of the people they had left behind, their families, their neighbors, their city. One morning he walked out early to get some fresh air. The countryside was quiet and beautiful. Birds sang and the sun rose slowly over the hills. For a moment he felt peace. But then he saw something far away, a white car parked on the road. It wasn't moving. He froze, staring. Was it just a traveler or were they still being watched? He went back inside quickly and told the others. "We have to stay hidden," he said. "We can't take chances." Zuberi nodded. "We can't go back now. The whole country is looking for us." Lena looked down. "But people need the truth. Who will tell them now?" Cato thought for a while before saying, "Sometimes silence protects more truth than words. We can't help if we're caught." That night they sat around a small lantern. The flame flickered as the wind blew through cracks in the wall. Lena spoke softly, "Do you think people still believe in us?" Tarek smiled faintly. "Yes," he said. "They may not see us but they remember what we did. The truth doesn't die just because we are silent." Outside the world continued to talk. Some said the Mirror of Truth had been arrested. Others said the group had escaped the country. But in secret many still hoped they would return. The people shared old posts, whispering the stories to each other like songs. In villages and cities, workers and farmers spoke of the courage of those unseen voices who had dared to tell the truth. "They showed us what real bravery looks like," one man said. Back in the old house, Tarek sat by the window and watched the stars. He thought about Makwili, the noise, the lights, the life they had left behind. He missed it, but he also knew they had done something bigger than themselves. Lena rested beside him, her voice quiet. "Maybe one day we can go back," she said. "Maybe," Tarek replied. "But until then we wait." The night wind carried the sound of distant drums from a nearby village. The four friends sat together in the dark, tired but united. They had lost their city, their freedom, and their safety, but not their purpose. And somewhere in Makwili, behind closed doors, people still whispered, "The Mirror of Truth will rise again." The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet village, lighting the fields where a young farmer named Duma worked every day. His life was simple. He tilled the land, tended his goats, and lived in peace far from the noise of the city. But that peace changed the day he found the old house by the edge of the forest. Duma was walking home with a sack of maize on his shoulder when he saw smoke rising from the chimney of the old place. That house had been empty for years, ever since the owner died. Curious, he moved closer, his feet silent on the dry leaves. As he neared the doorway he heard voices, low, tired, and frightened. He stepped back quickly, his heart beating fast. Through a small crack in the wall, he saw four strangers sitting around a dim lantern. They looked weak, hungry, and afraid. Duma watched for a long moment before quietly turning to leave. But something made him stop. He had seen those faces somewhere, on the news posters, on the screens people whispered over. Then it came to him. The Mirror of Truth. These were the people everyone was hunting. He froze, torn between fear and pity. If he told the soldiers, they would reward him. But as he looked again, he saw how thin they were, how one of them, the woman, was coughing softly into her hands. They didn't look like criminals. They looked like people running from something bigger than themselves. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the 4 strangers hiding in the broken house. Finally, before dawn he made a choice. He packed some food, cassava, bananas and water, and went back. When Tariq opened the door and saw him, he stepped forward quickly, ready to defend the others. "Who are you?" he asked sharply. Duma raised his hands. "Peace," he said softly. "I'm Duma. I live in the village nearby. I won't tell anyone. I brought food." Lena stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you help us?" He looked at her, his voice calm. "Because I know what it's like to see wrong and stay quiet. You spoke when others were afraid. That takes courage." For a long moment no one spoke. Then Zubri stepped forward and took the bag of food. "Thank you," he said. "We don't know what to say." Duma smiled faintly. "Just eat. You look like ghosts." From that day Duma visited them often. He brought fresh fruit and water and sometimes he stayed to talk. They told him stories about the city, about how they started the Mirror of Truth and how it changed everything. Duma listened with wide eyes. "You made people think," he said once. "Even here in my village people talked about you. They said someone finally spoke the truth." Tariq shook his head sadly. "And now look at us, hiding like thieves." "Still," Duma said, "truth never hides forever. Even a seed buried in the ground finds its way to the sun." Those words stayed with Tariq for days. But peace never lasts long when the world is looking for you. One night, the sound of trucks came rumbling down the dirt road. Soldiers. Their headlights cut through the darkness, and the air filled with the echo of engines. The old house trembled under the noise. Lena's eyes widened in fear. "They found us," she cried. Duma ran in through the back door panting. "Soldiers are searching every hut. They are asking about strangers." Zubri looked around the small room. "We can't run anymore. They will find us before dawn." Lena's voice trembled. "What do we do now?" Tariq looked at them all, his heart pounding. "Maybe it's time," he said quietly. "We started this for the people. We shouldn't end it by hiding." No one answered. The only sound was the distant rumble of trucks and the barking of dogs. Finally, Cato nodded slowly. "If we must face them, then let them hear the truth from our mouths." Before sunrise, the soldiers reached the village. The people woke to shouting in fear. The commander demanded, "Who brought outsiders here?" No one spoke. Duma stood among them, his face calm but his heart raced. Then to everyone's shock, 4 figures walked out from the trees, tired, dirty but standing tall. Tariq stepped forward and said, "We are the ones you're looking for." The crowd gasped. Women covered their mouths and children clung to their mothers. Soldiers raised their guns, but the commander lifted his hand to stop them. "Who are you?" he demanded. Tariq looked him in the eye. "We are the Mirror of Truth. We told the people what their leaders were doing. We did it for the country, not against it." The village went silent. Even the soldiers paused. Lena's voice broke the silence. "We didn't steal. We didn't harm. We only told the truth." The commander frowned. "You broke the law." Zubri stepped forward. "Whose law? The law that protects lies or the one that protects people?" The man didn't answer. He only stared at them. The villagers began to whisper. Someone shouted, "They are heroes, not criminals." Another voice followed, "They spoke for us when no one else could." Soon the whole crowd joined in. The soldiers looked uncertain. Tariq turned to the villagers and raised his voice. "We didn't mean to bring trouble here. We only wanted to open eyes. The Mirror of Truth was never ours. It belongs to everyone who dares to speak the truth." Duma stepped forward, his heart full. "They told no lies," he shouted. "If they are guilty, then so are we for being silent." The commander looked around at the crowd, at the faces filled with courage and anger. He gave a long sigh and lowered his hand. "Take them," he said quietly to his men, "but treat them well." The soldiers surrounded Tariq and his friends, but they didn't drag them roughly. The people followed as they were taken to the trucks, shouting words of support. Lena turned back and smiled at Duma. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," he replied. "You showed us all how to stand." As the trucks drove away, the village grew silent again, but something had changed. For the first time, people felt no fear in their hearts. They spoke freely, telling the soldiers what they really thought about the government. The story of that day spread across the country. People shared videos and pictures of the 4 friends walking proudly with their heads held high. For the first time, many saw that truth could make even the most powerful tremble. In the cities, students marched. Farmers spoke in open meetings. Market women chanted, "The truth cannot be jailed." The government was shocked by the reaction. The Mirror of Truth had returned, not as a website but as a spirit among the people. In the small village of Duma, the old house stood empty again, but on its wall, someone wrote in charcoal, "The truth may hide but it never dies." That night, Duma looked at the stars and whispered, "They faced everything and still they stood." Somewhere, far away in a guarded cell, Tarek smiled as he heard the people's voices outside. For the first time he knew they had truly won, not by escaping but by being brave enough to face the world. The courtroom was full from corner to corner. People stood by the windows and even outside in the hot sun, waiting to hear what would happen to the four friends. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and guards kept their hands close to their weapons. The trial of Tarek, Zuberi, Lena, and Kato had become the biggest story in the country. Inside the courtroom the air was tense. The friends sat together, tired but calm. Tarek looked straight ahead, his face unreadable. Lena held her hands tightly in her lap. Zuberi kept glancing toward the crowd, trying to find familiar faces. Kato bowed his head in prayer. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The sound of chairs scraping filled the room. The judge's voice was deep and slow. "You stand accused of spreading false information, disturbing peace, and causing unrest in this country. What do you have to say for yourselves?" Tarek rose slowly. "We told the truth," he said clearly. "That is our only crime." A low murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge frowned but Tarek continued. "We didn't fight anyone. We didn't steal. We used words. If words can shake a nation then maybe it needed shaking." The guards shifted uncomfortably. The judge hit his hammer on the desk. "Order," he shouted. Outside people were gathering in thousands. Students, farmers, teachers, and market women held signs that read, "Free the Mirror of Truth. And truth is not a crime." The streets echoed with chants and every passing hour brought more people. Back inside the judge looked tired. "The law must be respected," he said. "But it seems the people have spoken too." Lena stood now, her voice soft but firm. "We never wanted to fight the government," she said. "We wanted to help the people understand what was being done in their name. If that is wrong then so be it. We are guilty of caring too much." The judge leaned back, staring at the four of them. For a moment, the courtroom was silent except for the sound of distant shouting from outside. Then he sighed. "The court will decide tomorrow," he said. "You will remain in custody until then." That night, they were taken to a small holding room in the city jail. The walls were cracked and the floor was cold. Lena sat by the window looking out at the faint glow of streetlights. "Do you think they'll let us go?" she asked quietly. Tarek smiled faintly. "I don't know. But look at what's happening outside. The people finally have a voice. Even if they keep us here forever, the truth is free now." Zuberi laughed softly. "You always talk like a teacher," he said. "But you're right. They can silence a few of us but not everyone." Kato nodded slowly. "Maybe this is what we were meant to do. Not to win but to wake others up." The next morning the noise outside was even louder. Crowds filled the streets around the courthouse. Some came from far villages, carrying banners with the names of the four friends. Others sang songs of courage and freedom. Soldiers stood guard, unsure whether to stop them or join them. When the four friends were brought back into the courtroom, they were surprised to see so many people inside. Even some of the guards smiled at them. The judge entered again, looking more serious than before. He read from a piece of paper. "After reviewing the case and considering the response of the public, the court has decided." He paused and everyone held their breath. "To release the accused." The room erupted in noise. People clapped, shouted, and cried. Tarek closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Lena covered her mouth in disbelief, tears rolling down her cheeks. Zuberi hugged Kato tightly, laughing through his tears. But the judge raised his hand again. "However," he continued, "you are warned. Never again use your platform to cause public unrest. Leave the past behind and live in peace." Tarek nodded respectfully. "We understand," he said. But in his heart, he knew the truth would never stay silent forever. When they walked out of the courtroom, the sight before them was overwhelming. The streets were full, men, women, and children cheering their names. Flowers were thrown in the air, drums beat loudly, and people sang songs about freedom. Duma was there too, standing at the front of the crowd, smiling proudly. When Tarek saw him, he ran forward and hugged him tightly. "You saved us once," Tarek said. "And now the people saved us all." Duma laughed. "It wasn't me. It was the truth. You just lit the fire." Lena looked at the crowd and whispered, "We didn't fail." Zuberi nodded. "No. We just started something bigger than us. As the sun set that evening, the four friends walked through the crowd, smiling and waving. They were free, but they knew their lives would never be the same. They couldn't go back to the way things were before. They had become symbols of courage and hope. Months passed, and the government tried to calm the country, promising to listen more and change old ways. Some leaders were removed from office and new ones took their place. The people had learned that they had power. The mirror of truth never came back online, but its spirit lived in every home. New voices began to rise: teachers who spoke honestly, farmers who demanded fairness, students who wrote brave words. The movement had begun and it could not be stopped. Years later, when the dust of time had settled, people still remembered their names. In schools, children learned about the four friends who dared to speak when everyone else was silent. In small shops, old men told stories about them. Whenever someone grew afraid to speak up, the elders would say, "Remember Tariq, Zuberi, Lina, and Cato, the ones who challenged the whole country and woke it up." In a quiet village far from the city, Duma often sat outside his house at sunset, watching the sky turn red and gold. He would smile and whisper, "They paid a heavy price, but they gave us courage." One day many years later, Tariq returned to that same village. His hair was graying now, and his face carried the calm of a man who had seen much. He visited Duma's grave, placed flowers there, and said softly, "You were part of this too, my friend." He then walked to the old house where they had once hidden. It was broken and covered in vines, but on one wall, the words were still clear: "The truth may hide, but it never dies." Tariq smiled and whispered, "We proved that, didn't we?" Then he turned and walked away, his figure fading slowly into the sunset. Back in the city, every now and then someone would find an old post from the Mirror of Truth still shared online, and they would smile. The stories were old, but the message still burned bright. And so the tale of the four friends became more than just history, it became a lesson. A reminder that courage might cost something, but silence costs more.